And if we think about the life of Christ, we see a life of suffering. We see a life of taking on suffering for people around him. We see a life of a God choosing to be human and live a human experience so that he could connect more deeply with the people around him. The Gene Keys wisdom contains a lot of teachings from Jesus Christ. And I'm sitting on this porch Christmas morning, and I just had a really cool synchronicity happen. So I read the Gene Keys every day, almost like a devotional, like somebody would with the Bible. And a lot of times I have a plan on what I'm going to be reading, but sometimes I just open it, like in the spirit of the original I Ching, to just see what comes up, almost like pulling a card. And when I did, I flipped to the 36th Gene Key. And the 36th Gene Key is one of the teachings of Christ within the Gene Keys. And I just thought that was so cool on Christmas morning. I had no intention of filming today. I thought I would just be with family. But let's explore just for a moment. The 36th shadow is the shadow of turbulence. And turbulence is all about suffering, specifically about emotional suffering. And in fact, the ancient Chinese name for this key is the darkening of the light. And suffering, remember, is something that we're meant to turn towards, because when we turn towards our suffering, it's an opportunity for us to choose differently. And if we think about the life of Christ, we see a life of suffering. We see a life of taking on suffering for people around him. We see a life of a God choosing to be human and live a human experience so that he could connect more deeply with the people around him. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to suffer. He could have sat up on high on his throne and had a million other ways to direct the world, but instead he chose to be human, to have humanity, and to embrace suffering. The 25th Gene Key is all about acceptance. It's all about making a choice to hang on the cross, because we know through that choice we can affect and serve the world around us. And please don't take this as some sort of I am Christ or you are Christ. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is the message and the energy behind what Christ did is available for all of us. The gift that comes from the 36th Gene Key is humanity. And that humanity comes about because suffering is universal. Suffering connects us all. And Christ used that suffering as a means for making it easier for people to understand and approach him. Christ absorbed that suffering for us, went down into hell and took on all of that suffering so that he could be connected to us, so that we could be connected to one another. And what that brings up is compassion, the city, the 36th city, which is eventually getting so comfortable with suffering that we embrace it and we use it as a muse. We use it as something that connects us so deeply to other men and women in the world because they have the same experience that we have. That compassion gives us an opportunity to not pull ourselves out of humanity and being divine, but instead choosing to sit in that humanity with another person. So often people in the spiritual world have this sort of holier than thou attitude, like, oh, tisk tisk, poor thing, you haven't figured it out yet. I'm so much higher up than you. And no wonder people don't want to embrace God in their lives. What we're meant to do is be right there with them. And that means feeling suffering with them, not thinking that you're past it or over it or through that stage or too good for it. Suffering is an opportunity to connect. And in the Gene Keys teachings, there are really three paths, which really ultimately come back to one being that split into a fractal trinity, and their wisdom and knowledge through the years came through three avatars, three actual people, although it can be helpful to think about these people as whole traditions of teaching and wisdom. First is Hermes, who has gone by many names, Merlin, for example, but it's all about high magic. It's all about alchemy. It's all about transmutation, taking frequencies into us and in the crucible of our belly, transforming those things into something else. Then we've got the Buddha paths, which is the path of wisdom, the path of no path, right? The path of creating space, the path of being wise. And then we have the Christ paths, which are the paths of love and the paths of sacrifice. And those avatars came to this planet so that they could continue to draw our spirits further along the pathway of evolution. They were given to us by grace in a spirit of involution, reaching down at the same time as we're striving and evolving up. And at any time, there are 144,000 avatars on this planet who are doing that exact same thing. I hope that you have a beautiful day. I hope that you allow in this path of love and sacrifice and suffering. And I just want to close this up with a reading of the Beatitudes, which, if you're not familiar, come from Christ, from the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.